And second, certainly.
All right, reporting is a go.
Thank you. Give it, 1 o'clock.
Officially 1 o'clock.
Yes, so we will call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board on March 31st, 2025. I'm Janet Hurley, the chair, and I will have each of our board members introduce themselves as well.
Sure, Kirsten Saltian.
Sarah Hatt.
Alex Weinhagen.
Thank you all. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Okay, in that case, we are in St. Johnsbury. This is the 4th of our roadshow meetings. And Kirsten, being the local host, is going to facilitate a little bit of a conversation here between you and the board and you. So take it away, Kirsten. And thank you for lunch.
Yes, thank you for lunch. That was yummy.
There are some remnants of drinks and snacks at the back for anyone who helped yourself. So thank you, Janet. I guess maybe we could start with, telling you a little bit more about ourselves and the work that we're doing. And I'd love to go through the room quickly and have everyone let us know who you are. I know a lot of you, but some general interest would be great. So for those of you who don't know me, I served as the District 7 coordinator for about 19 years. The District 7 is the Northeast Kingdom region until I went into this new role. And my background is in civil engineering. I was in consulting for many years. I guess, and I live in Linden. And
you're doing what?
Oh, yeah, in terms of the board's various responsibilities under Act 181, which is the new Act 250. And we'll get into more about the some of the elements of it, but one of the studies that I'm taking the lead on is about looking at what's working, what's not working, opportunities for efficiencies in how the Act 250, but also ANR and municipalities regulate wood products manufacturing. I've been working with the Agency of Natural Resources through Forest Parks and Recreation, and we're getting underway with the stakeholder meetings. The other study that I'm the lead on, but we haven't really done too much yet, is about whether or not the board will put in place some details in the form of rulemaking or perhaps guidance to clarify the new statutory requirement that deals with roads and driveways and what lengths will trigger Act 250 jurisdiction sometime hence. It's July 26th. Memory serves. No, don't quote me on that, but it's all out there. And Sarah and I will be working on that element of the Act 181 studies that the board is responsible for. So, yeah.
Well, thanks. So I'm Sarah Hatt. I came to this job most recently as a town manager from Fairfax. I'm from Franklin County. My hometown, which I'm fortunate enough to still live in, is St. Albans. And before that, I was a planner for many years with the town of Colchester. So it came from sort of that land use planner background. I'm working on Tier 1A. So as we transition to this sort of place-based Act 250, the Tier 1s, the areas that are going to be potential exemptions for Act 250 or deferred to municipalities. And we have to create guidelines around how people are going to apply for those things. So I'm working and taking the lead on the Tier 1A. Tier 1B, which is something Jen's going to be working on as part of the regional plan, is another one of those place-based exemptions. But I'm also working the road rule with Kirsten and a lot of other things. It seems like there's a lot of other things along the way, but just really enjoying this one.
Hi, I'm Janet Hurley, the new chair of the board. I come to the LURB from a few years at the Bennington County Regional Commission, where I was the assistant director. And before that, I worked for 8 years as planning director in Manchester. And many years ago, worked as planner in Chittenden County and So I also have a background in biological research. When I was places that I didn't have a job in planning, I was doing biologically related research. Sorry. Um, and my the things that I've taken on to spearhead for the board include, as Sarah said, regional plan applications, which also includes the Tier 1B status approvals. And I also have taken on we have responsibilities under the environmental justice law. And one of those responsibilities is to develop a community engagement plan for our program. And that's a few years out, but as we've been on this road show, we have, heard a lot about how Act 250 has a PR problem. And I think that, with a more public facing board and a board that's focused on things like community engagement, that, that's hopefully something we'll be able to work to, make less important in people's minds. So
Challenge accepted. So I'm Alex Weinhagen. I live in Burlington. I'm the Chittenden County person on this board. And I came from the municipal planning world. So I spent the last 22 years or so as the planner in the town of Heinsberg, which is in southern Chittenden County. And prior to that, did some planning work in the town of Westford, which is actually the Northeast Kingdom of Chittenden County. And wasn't supposed to be doing this work at all. And my academic training is in wildlife biology, and that's where I started my career, both here in Vermont and in Michigan. But transitioned when doors opened and other doors closed, and have been in planning ever since. Let's see. My items that I'm providing some leadership on the board to-do list for are the two of the rulemaking efforts. So Act 181 compels us to adopt rules for identifying Tier 3 areas. We can talk more about what all these tiers mean. But we do have to identify what those Tier 3 areas are. So I'm trying to help lead on that effort in conjunction with our A&R partners. And then we also need to craft rules for the new criterion 8C on forest blocks and habitat connectors. And that rulemaking effort will begin a little bit later this summer. Beyond that, I'm doing what all five of us are trying to get used to doing, which is to help ensure the success of the overall Act 250 program and work with staff to administer the program and all those facets that we've been learning about since we were seated at the end of January.
I'm Brooke Dingledine. I've been an environmental attorney here in Vermont for 29 years. So I've done lots of Act 250 work over the decades, representing permittees, applicants, municipalities, as well as neighbors. So I have the perspective of engaging in Act 250 permitting and enforcement from all of the sides of the end user. And that's the experience that I bring, as well as being an attorney. Hopefully that will help in my primary task, which is the appeals study. And the legislature has asked us to contemplate how to expedite and speed up housing appeals, how to consolidate A&R appeals, as well as zoning municipal appeals, such that those can be consolidated for hearing either at a board model, which they would like us to study and examine, or whether to stay with the environmental division, and if so, how to expedite the process there, what can be done to shorten the time periods that we see, at least the portion of cases that are appealed, which is a small number, But there is concern that they just literally take too long and require too many financial resources as well as other resources. So it's an important study. I'm trying to engage all of our commissions, coordinators to have input in it, as well as the statutory stakeholders. Because we want to make sure that we get it right and give the legislature the best information and the best recommendations that we can.
Thank you. So, what I'd like to do is maybe, hopefully someone quickly go around the room. Everyone let us know who you are. By the way, we didn't say thank you so much for coming. As Janet said, we've been going around the state. We've been to Essex, Springfield, Rutland. And the two elements that we've been covering at these regional visits is an opportunity to hear from the district staff who work in a particular region and the local commissioners who are, on the front line doing application review in the area. So here today, we have some staff and commissioners. And we're also have invited and are happy that the Area Regional Planning Commission, in this case, the NVDA, has agreed to check in with us and show us how they're doing with their ongoing work on regional plan updates that are part of the implementation under Act 181. So we'll be hearing from them later, but we'd really like to have a dialogue with you and hear from anyone in the room who would, kind of like, what's on your mind? What might you say to us as a new board? Sort of anything.
But let's get introductions first. So we
Oh,
all know
yes,
who you are.
sorry. So let's maybe Rachel.
I'm Rachel Monaco. I'm the business director for the Land Use Review Board.
I'm Maddie Cotter. I'm the legal technician, and if you haven't had a chance to sign in on the sign-in sheet, please do that so we can put it in the minutes and keep track of all that. Thank you.
Allison Despati, Danville resident. I'm the chair on the planning commission, and the only sort of experience, well, maybe 15 years ago that my husband and I had with Act 250 was all what you're talking about, sort of the negative Act 250, without people understanding what it was because we were building a house. And then as I've been more involved with the planning commission and working closely with a lot of other district commissioners and learning from people who watched the whole evolution of Act 250, its history, its kind of reshifting, shaping, dismantling. I've been like, what is this thing? And oh, it really actually serves this amazing role. So I've come to really understand and respect that and see where you guys are landing. Some of my personal things, I think maybe go back to you, Alex, with the tier 3, with the critical resource areas, and also just sort of aligning that with, sorry, I'm going on a little bit, but I want to make sure I convey this. Thank you. The critical resource areas, this 30 by 30, 50 by 50, private property, this whole sort of space where we want to protect, environmental, we want to be good stewards, but then we also, how do you guys, look at those areas? How does that get defined? And I know Brooke, just through her work, we had both testified in Senate Finance, I guess that was last year. And so have a lot of respect for your work. I know you're the most, I'm just meeting you guys. So thank you. Thank you for trying to sort this through and make it, I guess, more efficient and workable and just help people, Vermonters, understand it. What is it supposed to do with this role? And yeah, so thank you. Yep.
My name is Kevin Anderson. I'm a district coordinator for the board, Land Use Review Board.
I am Nicole Davignon, and I'm a District 7 Commissioner.
I'm Clark Atwell. I'm an alternate commissioner, an attorney here in town. And I represent a number of these municipalities in the area, as well as private individuals. And just to add a little bit to some of the comments, I express that in my experience, when parties, either the applicant was engaged in gamesmanship and just kind of use the process to gain an advantage. But I think that's one of the reasons for the bad reputation. But another aspect of that is people are terrified of the cost of the process. And the municipalities are terrified that they're going to have a very expensive appeal that they have to participate in, even if they're not really actively managing it, taking a position. Just the cost is a very large factor. If there's any way to streamline it, which I'm sure there are limitations on that. But anything you can do to make that process a little more friendly and efficient, would be much appreciated. And, Janet and Alex, I have a BS in biology, so.
I'm the executive director for Land Use Review Board. Being here, you may remember me from such series as former attorney for the board, and I came back as the executive director. One of the reasons for some of the things that Clark was talking about in terms of, I'm very excited to have this new board put into place and working with them to better the overall process of experience.
I'm Keith Johnson. I'm a member of the District 7 board. I'm a civil engineer. I live in Lindenville.
Hi, Dave Snedeker, Director of the Northeastern Vermont Development Association. So we're both the Regional Planning Commission and the Regional Development Corporation for the Northeast Kingdom. And thank you for all for coming to St. Johnsbury.
I'm Liam Abate. I'm a planner at NVDA and the lead mapper for future land use mapping of the region, including 11 municipalities.
I'm Kyle Dwyer. I'm also a regional planner with NVDA, and I guess I'm obligated to mention I have a BS in biology.
I'm Allison Lowe and planner with NVD.
Council Ward, I'm a planner at NVDA and not biology, but environmental science.
Eugene Reed, I'm with District 7, and I appreciate the job that you guys are taking on. Huge task.
You think I'm the technician for District 3 and District 7.
I think that's everyone. So, yeah, what else is on people's minds and us too, if there's anything, love to hear more.
Some of us are new. She isn't new, but I'm new. And so I've been really interested to hear from commissioners and staff and others, the types of things that you think somebody new to the Act 250 program should know, or things that you perhaps wondered about when you were new to the program and were like, I wish I'd known that, earlier on. So yeah, we're interested in hearing about the various projects that the board is tasked with, but also just your experience and thoughts on the program. Anybody have one?
Well, earlier, when we were eating lunch, Eugene expressed that, really, as the local board, the main thing that they've been reviewing are traffic and aesthetics. And so those are the criteria that they have been reviewing. I'm wondering, are there any additional criteria now with the new changes that the local board, and then what are you guys going to be hearing appeals on? I heard a mention of zoning permit appeals. Is that coming to you guys or still going through the environmental?
That still goes through the environmental court, but the legislature has asked this appeals study to consider whether or not, basically to go back to a board model like the old environmental board, only, with the professional board and diverse expertise. They've asked that the deadline be moved up to November 1st from January 15th. So we have a very short timeline for that, but this would be basically replacing the environmental division by creating a board, but it would only make sense for the Act 250 appeals and the zoning appeals to come to the same location, because often the projects require both kinds of permits. Though I will just mention in the statistics that I'm seeing as well as my own experience, it's often difficult to coordinate time-wise those two permitting processes, as often the developer might want to get the zoning permit secured first before they go to the expense of the Act 250. But, yeah, right now, if you go from a town, DRB, to the environmental division, and the town select board can make an appearance at that. And right now in Act 250, it goes from a district commissioner or a JO from a district coordinator up to the environmental division. And the former NRB, now the blurb, becomes a party to that appeal, like the town would in a zoning matter. So it's a change, it would be a change in our role from a party on appeal to the action tribunal.
But nothing has changed yet.
Right, this is a step.
And similar with the criteria, the Act 250 criteria, nothing has changed yet.
So right now, you're a party on the appeal to the environmental court, but I think the change you're talking about is you would be the decider. So instead of the environmental court, just as a lawyer who's not done a lot of appeals to the environmental court and did one or two to the board before the environmental judge. I like the judges. I think that they're really qualified. Not that the board wasn't, but it just seemed like a lot more concise and a much more concise and focused process than when it was in front of the board. That's just a gut feeling now. I take it for what it is.
And in the study, what we're trying to do is we're going to look at the components of the two models to see what it is that we can do because here's the thing, environmental division rules of procedure. Rule number 1, sentence 2 says, these rules shall be applied, and this is not a direct quote, but it says, these rules shall be implemented in a way for a summary and expedited appeal of these matters while preserving due process or providing due process. So
there's a manageable task, right?
But in my opinion, it's about looking at the components and trying to find models that we can say, if you're focused on this legislature, we would recommend this or that.
Yes.
So it is a big job. Would you like to help? We'd like to put you on the stakeholder list.
I'm glad that you're in charge of that analysis.
So Clark, you were asking if there are new criteria.
Yes.
So there is a new criterion 8C that Alex is taking the lead on. But it has to do with identifying and protecting important forest blocks and habitat connectors. That is a new criteria, and I don't want anyone to construe that Act 250 commissioners are only looking at criterion 5 and 8, which are traffic and aesthetics. It does sometimes kind of distill down to that. It's like some of the other criteria many of them have other state agency reviews that come into play. But there are quite a few that go beyond 5 and 8, like criterion 9B, environmental soil protection. There's no corresponding, state permit per se. It's just one of the criteria, criterion 1E streams. Anyhow, I don't know if Eugene wants to,
No, there's 10 criteria, my feeling is you meet the 10 criteria, you can get yourself a permit. Don't overcomplicate it. A lot of those criteria though need another permit from another agency. And if you get that permit, I'm not an expert on air pollution or water quality. I just accept that permit as I check the box on the application. So when I say it boils down to 5 and 8, those are the two criteria that don't usually require another longer, more intense term.
And as far as this new criteria in 8C, the forest blocks and habitat connectors, the statute doesn't have that. The commissions will not have to consider that until, I think it's January 1st of 2027. we have to have our rules in place by, sooner than that, obviously, but I think it doesn't take effect until the end of 2026.
Alex, you mentioned, I'm just sorry to keep dominating the conversation, but I think this is my last question. I think it was you who mentioned the road length. Did that come back in? I remember Act 250 used to have roads, and then they stopped doing it. Is that?
They're back. It was
They're back.
Kirsten that brought that up, but yes, the road rule is back and it's not effective yet, but when it does become effective, development that includes the construction of roads over 800 feet or a combination of roads and driveways over 2,000 feet triggers Act 250, regardless of whether it's just a single house being built or a larger subdivision.
So, but roads, for example, just for forestry use, that wouldn't trigger it,
Correct.
even if it was.
Correct. And trails aren't considered roads either, so those don't trigger it, but I think what our partners at ANR are helping us understand is that, if you take our existing network of public and private roads and you just buffer them out by 800 feet, you'll see where jurisdiction is now going to apply because it's everything else essentially. And it's a very large chunk of this state. So it's not an insignificant new jurisdiction that came in via statute. And we won't be changing that, but we are enabled to clarify, maybe make rules or guidelines to help clarify that. But that was ultimately a policy decision by the legislature to expand Act 250 jurisdiction quite a lot.
It seems to me if there was a forestry road and then they wanted to develop, that road would probably have to meet your criteria because it's a new road, even though it's an existing.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, and I'm speaking off the cuff here because we haven't really talked about this, but likely the same with the driveway, even if it's not a forestry road, but it's a driveway serving a single home and is going to be upgraded, widened and turned into a road to serve maybe 3 more houses, it's probably going to trigger the road rule as well.
So there is some fairly specific language in the new legislation that defines some of those kinds of circumstances. I'd be happy to send it to you.
Please.
And then we have not had conversations about.
I'm just thinking, what am I gonna tell my clients?
Yeah.
I realize you haven't had the conversations, but I want to have an idea how it's.
Yeah.
Well,
Quite a bit of detail in
Yeah.
statute.
Yeah, honestly, the conversation we have had is that we're allowed to, I forget what the statute says, rules or guidance. We may adopt rules or guidance regarding the road rule, but what we have talked about is that the statutory provisions, as Kirsten said, are so specific, we may not need to adopt much, because, so she's right, you can get a lot just from that new statutory provision, which again, does not kick in yet, but, will.
I'll know how to advise my clients that that's important.
Allison, I know we don't have a lot of towns that have subdivision regs, but one of the few towns that does triggers a major subdivision review if the development involves more than 800 feet of new driveway. So I'm wondering how you're going to incorporate local regulatory considerations when you're working on the road rule. Will that come into play? Don't know. So the road rule is something that we may adopt guidance on. It's fairly straightforward for it now, and so that's something that we may do anticipatory or as reactionary, depending on things. To speak to the deference to local regulations, that really comes into play more so with the tier ones, with the 1A, 1Bs, those communities seeking sort of delegation of Act 250 or exemption from Act 250. So. No, that doesn't answer your question, but that's where we're at for now.
Well, I think, Allison, that Act 250 and local level regulatory review are parallel processes. They don't really intersect much, except that usually the district commissions are looking for some level of municipal approval, before granting a final approval. But yeah, I don't know that it would matter whether a municipality had a similar sort of characterization or distinction between minor and major subdivision. The Act 250 process and whether there's jurisdiction is ultimately the question for us, and that doesn't really rely on the municipal regulation.
I mean, historically, the kind of regulations that the community had is established threshold, so that's why I was asking.
Right, with regard to a 1 acre jurisdiction
Yeah.
versus 10 acre jurisdiction,
Okay.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
That's a status quo. There's the areas of the state that will remain in what will be called tier 2. Is a status quo insofar as individual municipalities will either have status as a 1 acre town or a 10 acre town. And, 6 or more lots in a 1 acre town, or 10 or more lots in a 10 acre town, trigger, will as they do now. At least that area of the statute was not changed.
Yeah, same decision point, exactly. The road rule doesn't modify that.
And remember, it's not the zoning regulations, at least for criterion 10, it'll be the town plan, but I do agree with Alex, these are separate processes, separate standards. And while there are criteria that obviously the town weighs in on, about capability and all of that, of emergency services, school, et cetera. Act 250 does not depend on an approval. I mean, just want to clarify, it's not like we have to wait for zoning before Act 250. And I know you know that, but I just want to send it a little bit.
I just had 2 questions. One was sort of a follow-up to what Clark was saying, just, and maybe this is already in the legislation, or the act, is, like energy projects, roads for energy projects. I don't know if there's any, or is that a conversation that you guys would have? Like Forest Road, I'm thinking Forest Road, and if there's energy projects that need a road development.
That's a really good question.
I don't know. I just see that, seems like it comes up sometimes. And the other thing, back to what Clark was saying too, I'm just wondering, I don't know the answer to this, but I feel like it factors in, because if there was the appeals board prior and then it went to a court, what was the reasoning? And one of the things that I see is, or that I sort of hear along the way here, is that sometimes the court piece is more sort of combative. There's obviously money involved, there's the combative part versus the board, and like, quote unquote, for whatever it means or not, the people's process. So just those sort of, looking at those aspects of just, why did we go to court? What was the reasoning there? And just like the court, because I heard obviously your opinion on the court aspect of it and how that seems to align or make sense in your experience. But then I'm also wondering, what the benefits of the board would be, and if it would be less combative and more sort of collaborative, or, so just raising that piece as well. Yeah.
Which is exactly what the appeals study is going to be looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, it will have a historical review of some
Okay, good.
level. We're not going in a deep dive because this has
Right.
been done ad nauseum.
Oh, yeah, for so
Decades.
long, exactly.
But to understand, why was the shift done through the courts? Because the original intent was this was to not be in the courts. It was explicitly indicated to be a board of citizenry.
Right.
So, but there are components to that need to be understood. There were reasons, and so the question is, those reasons, can we accommodate them in the different models?
Right.
Can we go back to the board model? But, there were shortcomings with the board model as well.
Right.
So that's what we're really trying to do, is see what worked and what didn't work of the components of these systems. Because it's not necessarily an either or.
Right.
Obviously, if you're before a board or a court, that's an either or. But there are changes in terms of what kind of standards of review exist, and when do you go to the court from the administrative process? So you bring up really, really good questions. And let me just, I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I do want to just say, in terms of overlapping or competing jurisdiction with Public Utility Commission cases, it's a legal analysis that has to be determined. But I will say that for telecom under the Public Utility Commission, zoning, telecom bylaws or telecom provisions within zoning are critically important. And that is because that is similar to the town plan standards under criterion 10. At the PUC, they will look to telecom bylaws or telecom provisions in zoning bylaws as the standards by which the Public Utility Commission makes those kinds of orderly development or criterion 10 type decisions. And it has become a mythology that they don't matter. And in fact, I understand right now, there's a central Vermont town that has been told, just take them out of your document because they don't mean anything anymore because all that permitting goes on at the PUC. And I'm here to tell you that isn't the case. It is vitally important that telecom remains at the town level in zoning, even though maybe once in a blue moon, somebody might come for an actual permit to the town as opposed to now PUC.
And sorry, one last follow-up on that. So you're not necessarily getting, like the way you are with an enhanced energy plan, substantial deference, or maybe there is a little bit of a level of substantial deference with
Yeah, we're
telecom?
going too deep
Okay.
in the weeds.
Sorry, it should be in there. We'll talk later.
I'll
Thank
talk to
you.
about it. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Just to quickly follow up on that though, is, the road rule. The new language says jurisdiction under this subdivision shall not apply unless the length of any single road is greater than 800 feet. Oh, I was misreading it. I was thinking it was in a subdivision.
Okay.
It's not,
It's
it's just
not,
referring to
it's-
that subdivision
yeah.
in the statute, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, it does say that it doesn't apply to a state or municipal road, a utility corridor of an electric transmission or distribution company, or a road used primarily for farming or forestry. And so it says a utility.
Corridor,
Yeah,
that's
utility
not-
corridor is not
Still
necessarily.
doesn't
road.
answer.
Like,
Yeah,
this is maybe
right.
some of the
Yeah.
detail. that would
Prevention.
be-
Thank
Yeah.
you.
But it's a really important issue and we will have to look into that and get a legal opinion.
Yeah, okay, good.
I'm super excited about the appeal study because like you're saying, I was here when it transferred from the board to the court, but I was only, a baby.
Right.
In the planning world and just was vaguely aware of things happening.
Right.
But I'm definitely aware of people's impressions of how the e-court works and doesn't. And I'm gonna be really interested to hear what, the stakeholders and just members of the public have to say about that. To try to solidify, what are the pros and cons? Cause I doubt that there's one perfect model, right? There's gonna be pros and cons to both. But this issue that was raised about cost and the time has been one that's dominated the news cycle anyways. So yeah, it's gonna be a really interesting study and see what kind of recommendations come out of us at the end of it.
Oh, and I'll just finalize the argument by saying, the discussion by saying, there is a huge difference between being under the Administrative Procedures Act in a quasi judicial proceeding and then crossing over to the judiciary with the rules of evidence and the rules of environmental procedure. There's a huge difference, Clark, obviously, of course, as you well know. And whether it's a perception, I think it is reality, it's far different to be able to operate in that venue. So if you make it better, easier in that venue, or if there's a different venue that works better.
Just remember though, all we're doing is issuing a report.
With recommendations.
With recommendations, but we don't get to rewrite the law. That'll be up to a future legislature to decide whether they want to do that. And a future governor can decide whether to say yes.
I think we're at the time when we were going to be welcoming NVDA's sort of planning update, unless there are any kind of last sort of burning questions or.
Really quick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Is there a list of 10 acre and the 1 acre? tunnels?
Yes, on our website.
Okay,
Yep.
good. I didn't know
About half and half.
Yeah.
Which was surprising.
that. Yeah.
Predominance of the ones in the Northeast Kingdom region are still 1 acre towns.
So who's coming up for NVDA?
I'm gonna leave that to my senior staff, because Allison's been coordinating the meetings with the planners on the update of our original plan, and also the future land use mapping.
So, we were just planning on doing something pretty informal here, but, we've been meeting every week. to, figure out how we're going to tackle this. I mean, we are doing it town by town, which I can't think of another way to do it really. And we have 50 of them. So what we do is, Liam has been taking the lead on following the, methodology. We've been picking towns that we know will be, having their funds will be expiring soon or right around that time, or if they've shown an interest in participating in it. So we come up with, develop a draft map, and then we go out and we meet with the towns, meet with the planning commission, and we get their feedback so that, you know, they feel like we're doing this with them and not to them. Basically, so it's a lot of meetings. We're also finding that for the most part, we get some feedback, and so it's not really done in one meeting. So, we selected some samplings here, and all of these samples, and I'd like to, Liam can speak more to these, but we have vetted all of these with our towns. So just to give you an idea of what we've been coming up with. It looks like, we will have a slight change to our methodology going forward. We're a little concerned about how that impacts our timeframe, and that pertains to river corridors, which is now going forward will be mapped as purely as an overlay. You know, we'll just going forward, we'll have to do that. Right now, we can't go back and change.
What was it originally going to be like, rural conservations,
So
FLU or?
in certain districts, it would not be, you would not delete it from the land use district if the community had flood hazard regulations and adopted. And there was some back and forth on how that's interpreted and applied.
And whether there was a high bar for what river corridor regulations would qualify as river corridor regulations on this criteria, and we determined that if they met the state's standard, then they met the Act 181.
Oh, wait, you lost me. So, we're talking about a future land use map with
Yeah.
categories that are spelled out in statutes,
Yes.
right?
Right.
So which categories were you guys gonna put the river corridors in?
So can I come up here?
Yeah.
Of course,
Absolutely.
yeah, come on up, Larry.
So, this map is of the town of Groton, which is in the southernmost part of the Northeast Kingdom, kind of southwest corner. And the town of Groton has zoning, but they do not have subdivision regulations like 43 of our 50 towns. And they have no flood hazard or river corridor bylaws. Their only rules on those matters are the rules the state has and enforces. So, outside of the existing village center, which is this purple area above my hand, all of the river corridors on this map in Groton, which are the current VAPTA methodology as of today, are included in rural conservation, which is the dark green.
Yeah.
But in towns such as Linden or Burke or Derby are only 3 towns that have river corridor bylaws. Those towns, the river corridors are also eligible to be included in planned growth areas, village areas, downtown centers, enterprise areas, resource-based recreation areas, but they are still prohibited under the existing methodology from being included in the yellow rural general or the blue rural ag and forestry.
So you're not talking about an overlay. You're just saying that in some towns, the river corridor will go right through some of those growth or some of those categories, some of those land use categories, and others they won't.
And it would not be extracted from that land use category. So if it were going through like a plain growth area or downtown or, you know, a village center, then it would still be included.
So it's only being extracted if those communities haven't adopted floodplain regulations of their own and river corridors.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
That is interesting, yeah, but,
So-
we've been hearing this discussion with the other RPCs that we've
Yeah.
been talking to. I don't think that this particular wrinkle has come up.
Well, very often, other regional planning commissions often have very different wrinkles because, for instance, in Northwest Regional Planning Commission, almost all of their towns have river corridor bylaws and subdivision bylaws. So their mapping process is very different, and we've spoken about that with them quite in depth. But yeah, so the town of Groton, for instance, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the future land use categories if you include hamlets. When we met with them, I had mapped one hamlet, the hamlet of West Groton along 302. And this screen might not be high enough for resolution to show, but there's a dot there. And then they also requested a second one at the hamlet of Ricker Mills, which is a historic cluster of like 10 or so houses. And I have been mapping hamlets as cluster, and there has to be 8 detached buildings for something to qualify as a hamlet. If it's 4 houses, to me, that's not big enough to qualify as a hamlet at a significance of regional approval, regional significance to appear on our regional plan. And then there's also a small resource-based recreation area along the northern end of Lake Groton where there's a state park and campground and store and seasonal museum. And it's very spiced up right now because of the requirement that the flood hazard areas not be included in the recreation area because Groton does not have the appropriate bylaws.
What color is the resource based?
It is light green right
Oh,
here.
okay.
And then the
Hard to
dark
see.
green is rural conservation, and the vast majority
Oh,
of
thank you,
the,
Maddie.
uh,
Got it.
the vast majority of the rural conservation in Groton is state forest or state wildlife management area or state park.
Mhm.
Keep hoping that there's gonna be a change in, the selection of colors. It's kind of hard
Well,
to decipher at the.
these maps do have the change in the color of the village center to make it more different,
Good.
which is provision.
Did the VACTA methodology change in terms of colors?
Originally, yes.
So it's changed recently?
This change that I showed on my maps has not been officially approved,
Oh,
but
okay.
CCRPC's been using it, and
Okay.
the existing colors for planned growth area and village center were such that everyone at NVDA and NRPC and CCRPC thought they looked the same.
Okay. Good to know. Version 3 will need to have to come out.
Yes.
Okay.
So yes, Groton, we've met with their planning commission, and the only thing that they indicated hesitation about was the expansion, if you could scroll down, of the village center here. So because Groton does not have subdivision regulations, I mapped this whole area, which is not currently a village center, south of the Wells River running here, as a village center, as the methodology from BAFTA says that in towns without infill opportunities, which Groton is not eligible for transition infill areas because there's no public water or wastewater system. So to include existing residential areas and then areas with suitable soil suitable for infill, such as coming out here to the west. But the town of Groton Planning Commission was not sure if they wanted that. They're still mostly going by the old definition of village center, which a lot of our towns are confused because it's a pretty big change from the definition that's been out there for 20 years. So they're saying they're gonna get back to me on whether they want this area included in the village center or not, but if they don't want it, it would probably all be rural general.
Okay. Want to go to the next town?
Yeah, there are other towns are more happening.
Jay, here we are.
Yeah, so St. Jay has almost all the land use, future land use area categories. There is no resource-based recreation area, but the rest of the ones are present. If you could zoom in on down here on the St. Johnsbury Urban Compact, that would be helpful. Darkest purple right here is the St. Johnsbury designated downtown as currently exists, which I snapped to parcel boundaries and I added a small area of the Memorial Valley Rail Trail Pavilion that is wedged between the downtown and the river corridor. That's somewhere along here. Then kind of making a U shape around the downtown is the planned growth area, which all has water, almost all of it has sewer, all is within about 1/5 of a mile of a sidewalk. And it's mostly pretty dense. So that area would be the maximum area that could be eligible for Tier 1A. But based on feedback from the zoning administrator and town manager, we expect that the only part of the planned growth area will be included in tier 1A based on the town's preference. And then we also have, so this downtown center was been previously mapped for many years. But historically, the town of St. Johnsbury has two other villages that have not been designated formally previously, but the planning commission has indicated interest in their town plan. So those are the villages of East St. Johnsbury and St. Johnsbury Center, which I have mapped. And then St. Johnsbury Center has a village area. Oh, there's a lot going on in this map. There's also a village area here and here and here and here for downtown St. Johnsbury. And those are areas that either don't have zoning that allow for 5 units per acre, they don't have sidewalks, they don't have blanking on what the other thing was. But they aren't quite as dense. And so those would be eligible for tier 1B status under the existing statute methodology.
And you're calling them villages?
Village areas.
Oh,
That is
village
what the
areas, sorry.
statute calls them.
Yeah, got it.
And then going outwards from the downtown, the orange areas are transition infill areas. So these are all areas connected to the St. J public water supply system. And they're zoned for at least 1 unit of an acre. They're predominantly not built up right now. And the town hasn't specifically been to all of them, but they largely align with the town's priority of where they'd like new housing to be built. Let's see. Oh, in light purple, we have enterprise areas. So I think there were 4 of these in St. Johnsbury. So there's one along Bay Street. That's kind of the historic rail yard serving downtown, and there's some light industry there. It's zoned for primarily industrial use. We have the Fairbanks Scales Factory over here, the FedEx Distribution Center. Up here is a gravel pit, and per our regional conclusions, we have been categorizing gravel pits or quarries of greater than 20 acres as enterprise areas. And this one I think is like 25 acres. It might actually be 2. And if you could scroll up the map, here we go. So this whole area is the St. Johnsbury Linden Industrial Park that much of it is owned by NVDA. And so that is kind of, well, in our presentation, we listed it as one of the main examples of an enterprise area because it is a formally designated industrial park.
That's a good question.
Sure.
The enterprise designation for sand and gravel pit areas, is that based on the size of the earth extraction area in of itself, the area that's open to not, not vegetated, it's like active or formerly active pit area, or is it the parcel size?
No, it is the former, the
actual
area that is not forested and is either impervious or disturbed,
Okay.
disturbed areas.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay. Oh, if you could scroll, right here, there's one hamlet in the town of St. Johnsbury that I've designated, the hamlet of Goss Hollow, which I think is like 10 or 15 houses along Goss Hollow Road here. I think at one point in time, this was like a long time ago, it had its own schoolhouse and church. I think there's church is still there. If you could scroll down again, sorry, I'm trying to show everything. So the rural conservation areas in St. Johnsbury include river corridors over here along Severance Hill Road. This is a very large source water protection area around the Northeastern Vermont Regional Hospital. We also have this area here and this area here are town forests that are included in the town of St. Johnsbury Conservation Zoning District. And then the remainder are bits of undeveloped land that are not forests, but are habitat blocks or forest blocks, as if it is a high priority forest block and a actual forest, then we've been mapping it as rural forestry, as otherwise something like 70% of our region would be rural conservation. And we also want to prioritize the use of the area.
Can I ask about the source water protection area? Is that undeveloped area?
No, it has a hospital.
Do you know if it's I don't know, get in too deep into the weeds, but there are zone one areas and zone two and zone three. Do you know if that's like?
It is a zone Inc. area, which I'm not sure whether what that qualifies as.
Okay.
Does the VAPTA methodology ask that it all be incorporated into rural conservation if it's developed?
If it is not in a growth center or growth area, then yes.
That seems.
Contradictory?
Yeah.
I don't disagree, but I did not.
So,
methodology.
You know, it's something that you might not think of until you circle something like this in green.
I mean, otherwise, I would think of the hospital as like an enterprise area.
Right.
Yeah.
No, this is good. You're bumping up against things that maybe aren't quite, show that the standards that
Is this
VAPTA put together might need
a
tweaking.
little,
We have not brought this map before the St. Johnsbury Planning Commission, but we've reviewed it with the zoning administrator and town manager.
how about, have you, participated in those mapping meetings that VAPTA's been doing regularly and talked about this?
I've been to every one of those.
And have they talked about this particular issue?
Yes, in
Oh, okay.
Newport, I mapped a very large conservation area right next to downtown in the source water protection area. And one of the people from Northwest Regional Planning Commission informed me that I was including the zone 3 source water protection area, and I only was supposed to include the zone 1, which is much, much smaller and made a lot more sense because otherwise like a third of the city of Newport was conservation.
Okay.
That and the exclusion of river corridors, because with the tier 1A areas, there's the ability to actually include them in the tier 1As if proper planning has been done for them.
Right.
Well, St. Johnsbury does not have river corridors, but if that was to be a criteria for tier 1A, they would be interested in adopting.
Which is also odd,
It is.
because starting in 2026, the state will be managing them. It doesn't matter what municipalities have for
Right.
regulations, they'll all be preempted, so.
There are several people from regional planning commissions who have been shouting that over and over.
Yeah, it seems odd to have these river corridors either turn on or turn off.
Well, with the tier 1As, you have a community could apply and either you could exclude them or you could do the proper planning and include them. But the way that the future land use area is being mapped would basically prohibit a community from applying for a tier 1 for that whole area, because that's going to give a different future land use area to the river corridor in that downtown possible. So I see some concerns with the methodology.
Better get on that rulemaking about minor amendments to future land use. That's another rule thing we're allowed to do, right?
Yeah, 10 acres.
Oh, that's right.
It's, I don't know. how often that's gonna
So
happen.
regarding tier 1A, we have tentative commitment from 3 of our towns, and this is tentative. But we have 3 towns that we expect to see tier 1A status: St. Johnsbury, Newport, and Hardwick.
Do you have some sense of which municipalities are interested in tier 1B?
Well, unless the statute is changed, most of our towns are ineligible as they lack subdivision regulations. But we expect potentially towns like Linden and Derby and Burke.
And just, we just sent off a whole spate of municipal planning grant applications. So, Brighton, which is, one of our largest development centers in Essex County, is updating their municipal plan and evaluating the need for subdivision regulations that might give it tier 1B status. That's in addition to a whole other set of recommendations to increase density and to improve the infrastructure to support it. But there are communities that currently don't qualify, but are thinking about it.
For those unfamiliar, Brighton includes the village of Island Pond.
So another community that has been contemplating it one way or the other is Greensboro. And I think it was largely triggered by the discussions with Rural Edge for the redevelopment of the town hall. It was project specific, but I don't think that debate is going away anytime soon.
Greensboro also has reservations that the VAPTA methodology says that class 3 soils, which I'm not a soils expert, but this is the data, that class 3 soils are suitable for medium density village development. And the chair of the Greensboro Housing Committee disagrees with that. So that might prevent them from seeking Tier 1B status because they don't believe in the soils data.
Well, that's part of the interim map, for exemptions that you're talking about.
Well, the interim exemptions only apply in towns with subdivision regulations, and that does not currently include Greensboro or could in the future.
Yeah.
The
Because
whole
that's
process started when the developer approached the planning commission to ask them if they would consider drafting. Actually, it was other advocates for the housing project as well. They would consider drafting subdivision regulations so that they would qualify for the temporary exemption. But now that we're into the future land use mapping, I mean, that debate isn't gone away. So,
So we have 5 minutes left and I think you have one more, Matt.
I have two, but the fourth one is not super important. If we could scroll down to Newport, which I think is the next one. So the city of Newport is our smallest municipality and densest, smallest by land area. So it's probably going to be definitely going to be our only municipality that is not mostly the rural land types. So quickly, this is the downtown area. There's a planned growth area. Village area is down here where it's still pretty dense, but there's no sidewalks. And there's also a village area up by the hospital. One of my two questions for you is that this map is currently not compliant with statute as there's an enterprise area bordering a planned growth area, which is not permissible in statute, but this enterprise area is all industrial. It's not allowed, it's not zoned for any residential use. So I guess I was curious if the LURB had an opinion of how an area such as that, which is next to the downtown, it has rail access, it's industrial, should be categorized as there is an almost identical situation in Lenexa.
So is it the methodology that says it should not be connected or is it the statute?
It's the statute.
So we need to go by what statute says at this point.
Okay.
Can't have an opinion if the statute says that. It doesn't mean that Newport can't call it what it wants on its own town plan.
but what do we call it then at the?
Yeah, I don't know what fits.
Yeah,
best.
we should look at that statute
Yeah,
and be sure,
yeah.
because this is not the only municipality that has
Right.
industrial
Right
zoned
next to.
right in or next to their planned growth area.
Well, if you're just talking about the Connecticut River line of the railroad, that exists in Linden and Bradford as well.
Right, I'm thinking just there are other parts.
Oh, I'm not
Parts of the
familiar
state,
with
yeah,
other
yeah.
parts of the state, but I'm sure.
Yeah.
I don't think that most communities that have a rail, an active rail line going through it with the livelihood.
And then, let's see, this area is all wetlands. This area is mostly, this is a former farm that the Vermont Land Trust has bought to conserve. What else do we have going on in Newport? This is a large, I think 30-acre gravel pit, and then this is another rail yard. This one's actually more active than that one. The zoning administrator informed me that this is no longer really being used as rail.
And have you discussed this in that BAFTA group, the adjacent enterprise areas?
Yes, and
Yeah.
nobody has come up with a good solution.
Okay.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time. I have one other question for
Go ahead.
you all. So I can't remember if it's in the statute, but in the BAFTA methodology, there's the expectation that every town should have a center if it meets the criteria. And I was wondering how seriously you were taking that, as many of our towns, or it's not many of our towns, but some of our towns have a very small center that I think of as a hamlet, and it's just like the town clerk's office, a church, and 5 houses.
It doesn't quite meet definition for village center, but every town should have a center.
Well, some of our towns will absolutely not have a center. I
Well,
can't
they-
designate one
they
in
can-
Wilmington.
Right, but I think the statute gives us gives that town the opportunity to designate that as a center, even if it is just a hamlet under, so.
But so you're saying it should be up to the town?
I have to say, I live in Kirby and they're not gonna want a designated center.
Well, there's nowhere in Kirby that meets the criteria.
Yeah, they don't want a center. They don't want a concentrated development.
Right.
And there's no place that really makes sense.
And we wouldn't require one either, but.
Well,
if it-
Kirby is one of 2 towns in Caledonia County that there's like no way there could be a center. The other is Stanton.
So,
So can we just crystallize your question? You're asking, what's the board's sort of take on a requirement that there be a center identified in every town? And that's
it's not a requirement,
it's not a
no.
requirement.
So, but what I'm hearing from you is, since it's a recommendation that every town has a center, if a town really desires a center, we should use some leniency and perhaps something that's normally be designated as a hamlet, be
Yeah.
considered a center.
Yeah.
And like I would think of Granby as an example.
Right, Granby has a village that has a half dozen houses, and there's an old schoolhouse that the town owns, and there's a town clerk's office and a church and a cemetery.
That
But
sounds
it's,
like it meets the definition.
Kind of, sort of, I mean.
but it's very small, it's on a dirt road.
Tie goes to the runner or the town in this case.
Yeah.
But I also haven't talked to the town. It's possible the town would not want to build.
Right, and so, as Clark pointed out, there may be towns that don't want to have anything to do with this, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, oh, sorry, Kirsten.
Oh, that's okay. I was just, it kind of leads me into wondering sort of big picture. How is your timeline looking? Are you
Our
thinking you'll
timeline's
make?
looking a little scary.
Yeah, I can
Well,
imagine.
and it's not really, it doesn't come down to, people power as it comes down to just so many hours in a work year.
Yeah, and so many
And
towns.
It's the number of towns that we need to get in front of.
So if we meet with
Get
6
that
towns in
feedback.
April and 6 towns in May, and we met with 2 in March, that still leaves 38 towns.
So for example, we met with the town of Craftsbury and they were really receptive to the draft map that we did.
That's
They're
the,
also, they're also extremely proud of their strong tradition of having working lands. So they identified many other places that in other cases would have been considered rural general, but they're very actively, pursuing haying.
Yeah.
So, and then they also wanted us to, for their own community, develop, to break out that rural ag forestry as to 2 separate layers. Because that was important to them as well, so.
What do you mean into 2
To
separate layers?
differentiate rural ag from
rural ag
rural forest.
Oh,
that would be for their own town.
Yeah.
Yeah, not the regional plan.
right.
But then the other thing is that, we're also finding that communities that are very sensitive to maintaining historic development patterns might identify areas that otherwise wouldn't qualify as a hamlet, but would like to see it as such,
Mhm.
like Collinsville.
And how is it going assigning the housing, the housing targets that I think the state gave that need to be sort of allocated? Is that going smoothly? Or, I mean, I don't know. if you're able to-
I think we're really in the very beginning stages
Okay.
by just assigning, basic percentages among, land use categories. One of the questions that's come up in, some of our regular month or bi-monthly meetings is how do you assign greater housing density to a community that has wastewater but lacks capacity, right, to accommodate a lot of, and the answers that I've been getting are, well, they have the capacity to expand it, but if you look at some of these preliminary engineering reports from these communities, that's a sweeping statement.
Yeah.
And in some cases, it would involve building a whole second system somewhere else. So
That
I'm not
goes,
quite sure how to address that one.
that goes also to that map though, that the mapping of soils, which may be conducive. Because I think it's meant to be sort of the big tent and not speak to just your traditional centralized infrastructure, but the potential for soils-based solutions too.
When you say by percentage, are you allocating them based on the municipal population? Sort of prorating it or I understand, it sounds like it's early in the methodology.
It's very early.
Yeah, so don't,
Sorry, I've tried to start to put together some kind of methodology. what we've talked about is breaking out a blanket percentage to some of our, the towns that we're thinking will be tier 1A, and then maybe our other 3 to 4 largest towns of blanket somewhere between, I mean, just messing around at 50 to 60, even 70% of just the total housing target for the region, and then trying to break it out. After that, I just want population base for the remainder, 50, 30 or so percent for the remainder of our towns. But I mean, we've talked about there's even a handful of our towns that can't support any growth at all. So we're trying to identify those and then reallocate whatever housing targets for those population base, which is small, but to the rest of our towns still. So I think it's an issue of, you know, we have 50 towns and it's going to take a while to have all the maps too, so we can fully wrap our head around how we can do it better. I guess.
Is your plan expiring? Is that why you feel?
No, we readopted it in 2023, just so that we wouldn't be swimming against the
Okay.
tide. And we were in the middle of developing a completely different plan that would be more user-friendly, would
Yeah.
read less like a white paper and
Right.
blah, blah, blah. But then we put that whole process on pause
see.
while we waited for Act 181 to roll out, and now we've started up that
So
process again.
It sounds like, well, we've been told that you were gonna be our first application, but it sounds like you might
Sounds like you're gonna be our last.
or maybe not the last.
Maybe second to last.
Yeah, yeah,
No one
so,
wants more.
but,
That's all right, because we too feel like we dove into the deep end of the pool, and there's not enough hours in the day. And with you being our first, to be quite honest, is a little bit terrifying, because given the timelines that we thought you're on. So here we all are, and we're all doing our best, and we'll figure our way forward.
yeah. Don't feel pressured from us.
Yeah, for sure. We're just ready when you're ready, and we all know that everybody's gotta figure it out by the end of 2026.
Well, there was that initial pride of being first through the gate, but,
Yeah.
once we started getting into the, just delving into the future land use mapping, and rolling it out to our communities, it is time intensive.
Yeah,
We've been
And
hearing that from the other.
we can't short circuit that. process.
especially you with the number of towns you have. It's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is kind of interesting too, is that we, over the past several particularly among towns that don't have zoning, and going back to them and saying, this, in some cases, the designation areas were unusually tight, and they could be expanded. That's a whole separate conversation as well. And we had a whole separate conversation about that in Craftsbury, where they just felt the original boundaries were a little too restrictive.
Yeah. So we've gone over a little bit, but given the size of your region, I think that's fine. And
So in addition to that, when we were introducing everyone, we forgot to let our participants, I forgot to
online.
introduce our online participants.
yeah,
So I apologize to everyone who may still be holding
One of
on
them is
there
Brooke.
remotely. We have
One's
some Act
Jenny.
250 staff.
Rebecca,
It appears Annette is
And
the
that-
sole member of the public.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Annette, are you there? Are you walking your dog? Because we were supposed to be on break. Is she not?
I unmuted.
Oh,
I don't hear her, but I guess if we're doing online introductions, I'll start. And I'm Allison Stone. I'm the General Counsel of the Land Use Review Board, excuse me. And I've been here since 2021. And my co-counselor on the line as well. I see Jenny's just turned her camera on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know why it's so dark, but I'm Jenny Ronis. I'm Associate General Counsel for the Land Use Review Board. I've been here for about 2 years. And I'll pass it along to Rebecca.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rebecca Shalifo. I'm one of the attorneys with the Land Use Review Board. Nice to hear from everyone today.
and Annette, your hand's up, so go ahead.
Her microphone is enabled, but, Annette, are you able to unmute your microphone? You should have the ability. There might be some technical difficulties from Annette.
Well, we were going to take a 5-minute break. If people feel the need for a 5-minute break, otherwise, I wouldn't mind just moving on. Do people feel like we need a break? Everybody good? All right, let's keep moving.
Can I ask a good question?
Yeah.
I think Annette mentioned the other day, she couldn't communicate, she wanted to write something in the chat. Are we able to enable that?
No, she sent me an email. We've been in touch about it, and so.
I just,
Yeah, no, the chat's not enabled.
Okay.
Annette, if you can hear us, you could send me an email if you have comments.
Do you want to take a 5-minute break to see if we can?
I kind of want to keep going just because it's a long drive.
Onward.
So we are at the opportunity for public comments and non-agenda items. If there are any further public comments on non-agenda items.
I mean, I was going to speak earlier.
Oh, go
but,
ahead.
Didn't want to, divert the conversation from local folks. I was just going to say that I am one of the district coordinators. I am one of the rovers, in a limited service role that expires at the end of this year. I've done most of my work in District 5, 4, and then more recently 7, with Kirsten's movement to the board, of course. And yes, I'm the interim coordinator in District 7 right now. So just 3 things real quick. One, I appreciate the board's interest and support for the rover positions. I think we do manage a pretty hefty workload, application and jurisdictional opinion workload. And I'm quite certain that applicants appreciate the availability of these positions because it means, a faster response time regarding inquiries, general inquiries, as well as application, just help navigating the application process. So that's just one thing I'll leave with you. I guess for a little, kingdom flavor, and Kirsten's an expert on this, I'd say, over my time, working in District 7, I have noticed a lot of landowners and business owners as the applicants, or as the people preparing the applications that are submitted to the District Commission for review. That's not to say there aren't great consultants that do work in the kingdom, but relative to my experience in Districts 4 and 5, more of it comes from your do-it-yourselfers. That may have something to do with the fact that there's so many 1-acre towns here, and there's a lot of maybe like cottage industry type development, right? So there's many examples of that. So that is something that is, I've observed here, and I've received a lot of comments from folks, including someone I was speaking with last week that I said I'd relay to the board, which is this is a complicated application to fill out for those folks that are new to the process. So I'm sure you all, have that sense from where you sit on the board, but that's definitely the experience that I've had trying to help you through the process. And then the other thing is just I'm very excited for the board. You have a really neat job ahead of you implementing Act 181. But Act 181 aside, I think there's a lot the board could do to make Act 250 work better for Vermonters and staff just by looking at our existing rules, looking for opportunities to revise and modernize those. I think specifically of amendment, jurisdiction, and procedure, which is the creature of our rules. As you know, the majority of permits issued each year are amendments. And then codifying application requirements, site plan requirements that are found in the guidance. Municipalities lay these things out in bylaws. I don't see why we couldn't do the same at the board. And also codifying some of the customary permit conditions. I think that's something we can put in our rules as well. I think a lot of times applicants see those conditions for the first time when they get their permit at the end of the day, not maybe necessarily aware that we have expectations regarding lighting, regarding erosion control, things like that. So those are just some ideas. I'm happy to share more of those with the board whenever, but look forward to being a sounding board for you all as you're working on things.
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to be asking about the appeal study.
Okay.
You know why?
And don't forget Clark. He's hiding under that tent over
Yeah,
there.
Clark's
Yeah.
not incognito, I know.
Annette, are you perhaps back with us and have any comments?
She emailed me and said she didn't have any
Okay,
comments to offer, and I'm working with her to get her
okay, great.
microphone enabled.
Thank you. All right, now we're ahead of schedule. Maybe if people need, they can take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
Nobody needs?
Yes.
Okay, let's just keep,
Yes,
Yes.
yes, 5 minutes bathroom break.
Yeah.
okay. Hey, Maddie, you're back. Are we recording?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Thanks for sticking with us. The board is now moving on to studies and reports, process updates from each of us. And let's start with Kirsten.
Sure, so it's sort of a continuation of the work that's been underway, mostly with FPR. We have a meeting on Thursday with some initial key stakeholders to review some information that we're also still busy compiling to come up with some preliminary ideas from a larger stakeholder group. And we have nailed down a date when that meeting will occur. Hoping to get the stakeholder group work done in sort of one meeting, but there's a possibility that we will reconvene a second meeting if needed. And that.
We can't see you online. We can't see I can't see the video anymore of the room. Just wanted to let you guys know that.
Oh, sorry.
I can still hear you, but.
That meeting has been set for April 22nd in the morning. And Rachel is helping us with a venue. Yes, we're planning to have that as a hybrid meeting.
Okay.
And I'm still nailing down a couple of the sort of categories of participants.
Okay.
So the other thing I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention is that the wood products manufacturing sector and the forestry sector as a whole has seen a lot of added pressure, I guess you could say, recently. And there were a couple of bigger articles last week. And people involved in those conversations are the same people who are working with the study. So everyone's feeling very busy. Just the uncertainty of the situation with tariffs. So,
yeah. Thank you.
Tier 1A, we're going to continue talking about this Thursday. I made some modifications, still as a sort of working draft in progress after our Thursday meeting, and incorporate a lot of what I heard from the board. On Tuesday, I'm going to be meeting with Rebecca and Janet about meeting procedure and guidelines. And then I think I was talking about with Rachel, some of the deliverables and timetables and sort of the merger of swim lanes. So hopefully can maybe start talking with the board a bit about a work plan for how we're going to get everything done on time allotted and priority. So
for 1A.
For 1A, as well as all the rest of our deliverables as they start to come in.
So all of it. Okay.
You now have that from all of us in terms of what you requested. And so we're trying to sum them together.
So that's me next. Modeled after Sarah's very thorough.
Excuse me. Just to help me, Jenna, could we tell me what we're talking about before we start talking so that I'm in the right place on the thing?
So Sarah talked about tier 1A, but then deliverables for all of our work. Working with Rachel on a singular document that would line up all of it in terms of when deliverables will be expected and
required and yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just meant okay, before you start talking, tell me what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tell me, because I have it all set up on the,
the topic.
Yeah, the topic.
Yeah.
That's what I need to know. And then I can jump to the right place and capture. what
Okay,
you guys are
so
saying.
regional plan approvals, regional plan tier 1B approvals, that's what I'm gonna talk about first.
Great, thank you.
And modeled after Sarah's excellent memo from last week. I drafted up a part 1 memo for the future land use map and tier 1A review processes. I had been thinking I would do it all in one, but it's a lot. So, I sent the draft to Sarah and I just want her to read it before I send it to Maddie to put forth for the whole board at an upcoming meeting. And I'm working on a part two that would just, outline all the relevant information for the regional plan review and approval. Actually, not really, it's a determination of compliance rather than an approval. So, and I have no updates on community engagement or EJ plus.
Okay, tier 3 rulemaking. That is the topic for me. So working with Rachel to secure rooms so that we can actually have sticky calendar dates for the stakeholder and public engagement meetings. Hope to report back to you shortly with those. Worked with Pete on website content so that we can have a web page specific to the tier 3 rulemaking and the criterion 8C rulemaking, as well as the overall Act 181 process, and continue to needle our partner in A&R. Billy Coster has been great, but as he indicated at one of our previous meetings, he is working on a document that will review each of the 6 statutorily required to be considered critical resource areas, sort of summarizing how they're defined, what their distribution is across the state, and a bit of value added input as to how viable they would be for tier 3 areas. So he's been working on that, and he hopes to have a draft ready of it by the end of the week, maybe a little bit beyond the end of the week. I've been talking to Pete and Maddie about trying to get the Act 181 project webpage up to date, hopefully this week, so that we can start doing stakeholder engagement, at least so I can start doing stakeholder engagement and pointing them to the website for background information that they need to know. So we'll see how that all comes together. And then finally, Eric Engstrom at A&R, who works with Billy, is the GIS guru for A&R, took the web page, the mapping web page that you saw a sneak preview of at our Rutland meeting, and has cleaned it up and made it public. And so it's live and ready for anyone to look at with lots of disclaimers on it. And so once our website is ready, we will link to that. And again, it'll be a resource for everyone to start getting their head around these resource areas and which ones we might pick to be tier 3 areas. And that is it on tier 3. I did reach out to a couple more people to be on the stakeholder group. I was interested in trying to find another representative who had planning expertise in more rural parts of the state, and Seth Jensen with Loyal agreed to serve. And I really value his opinion, and he's a little bit of an Act 250 critic. So I think it would be good to have someone with a sharp mind and also a little bit of skepticism as a part of that group, especially as to how Act 250 and increased jurisdiction through tier 3 is going to impact rural Vermont. Yeah, that's it. No update on criterion 8C, except that along with the rest of you, I've delivered finally the schedule to Rachel through that spreadsheet. And so hopefully we can collaborate and make sure that we're not doing everything all at the same time, although it looks like we may be doing a lot all at the same time, unfortunately.
So, quick update. I've talked a lot about appeals today already, but I'll just mention that I made contact with Judge Zone, who is the chief superior court judge, because I'd like to meet with him about the judicial statistics to make sure that I understand clearance rates and how they're calculating figures, but also to ask him if we can get some more specification, deep dive in terms of clarification on their statistics, which sometimes are lumped together in groupings like Act 250 and A&R appeals are put together as one line item. He is terrific as he always is, more than happy to help. So that's great. Saw him Friday at the Vermont Bar Association annual meeting that I attended. And and Billy Coster's gotten back to us. We're setting up a meeting to go over all of the A&R permitting with their general counsel as well as Billy. So we're looking forward to getting that underway, because really to lock down and understand the universe of information that we have to analyze and configure into a board appeal if that's what because that's what the study requires. So we're looking forward to Kirsten and I meeting with him. And I know they've sent a date. I didn't have a chance yet to accept it. It's this week. So that's great. That was the one thing we really I needed to get moving on.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So we can move on to operations, budget, and legislative updates, and maybe I'll start. Pete and I have been talking with legislators about our budget asks, since what came out of appropriations in the House didn't include our asks. And I think we had a really, we set up a half-hour conversation with the chair of the Senate Natural Resources Committee and ended up talking with her for an hour this morning. And she was very receptive. And, I have stressed that the most important thing is those two coordinator positions and getting funding for those. And, maybe not just temporary funding anymore. And we did talk about the other asks that we had in terms of the digital architecture. And we discussed maybe having some flexibility in what came out of House Environment, which was a $50,000 one-time part-time staffer to help the board. Maybe how about just giving us $50,000 and letting us use it for staffing and not having to hire a temporary person. So being a little less prescriptive. And then we talked briefly about the Act 180, the open meeting law carve out. We had provided some language that would allow us to confer with each other in between meetings, leaving, any decision-making or finalizing of things at our open meetings, so that we could confer with each other more than one-on-one in between our meetings. Don't know whether that's gonna go anywhere. It's the language that we offered was a change in it would basically open up Act 181. And there's been a real reluctance to open up Act 181. And this is sort of, well, if it does get opened up, there may not, and the reason is they don't want floor amendments that are going to bring in all the big things like let's get rid of Tier 3 and let's, so, but there may be a way that that piece could be put out there and it doesn't open up the entire bill again for reconsideration. So we'll see on that. Do you have any more?
I would just say we've heard that dissipation of that concern from the legislature on the House side. Now we're hearing it on the Senate side, meaning that there may be some appetite to open up some specific areas. Certainly makes sense. Everybody back to the police.
And one thing that Pete pointed out this morning, two things. One that, well, that we're sort of top of the heap.
Yeah, so
Or-
we followed back up with our House liaison on appropriations to say, so now what? And he basically said, well, there's two kind of things, you know, we're kind of early in the decision-making process on the budget side of things. We don't know the overall forecast as well as the Senate will know. We also don't know where things are gonna land on the federal side, which is a big cloud and, you know, something that folks are wondering about, and we'll have more certainty on that as time progresses. So they've basically taken a very conservative approach on the budget overall. We are, as I think I mentioned last meeting, we are with many other agencies not getting funding requests that are really critical to our programs. And he said, okay, we understand that we have a kind of contingency list, and in the top of that list is your guys' request. So that was comforting to hear that at least. And that I think was helpful to be able to say that then on the Senate side, when we were talking and having our discussions and saying, you know, we didn't make that, but it wasn't because that wasn't important to them. That was where they were in the timing, et cetera. And we'd really like to see that happen here so that we can then bring that back when it goes back for adjustments.
And the other, I think, important point that you made this morning is that people are comparing the Land Use Review Board to other boards a lot. And that Pete's point was that, in fact, those other boards, their staff is set up around just the board. But we have staff that are critically important to our program that are not. They're set up around our districts and our district commissions, and they can't be diverted to the board. So I think that underlays how important it is to get funding for those two ordinary positions. So any operations and budget oriented?
Actually, can I poke on
Yes.
one legislative one? Because it just came to my attention last week. I don't know if anybody's seen it yet. S-133.
34?
I think it's 133.
Okay.
So it was just introduced last week.
Okay.
We're after crossover, so I assume it's not going anywhere this year unless somehow it gets tacked on one of the housing bills that are moving. But look at it. It makes the wood products manufacturers report moot. Because it just declares that those manufacturers are exempt from Act 250, period. And it does change one of the tier 1A criteria such that adequate municipal staff is amended to be adequate municipal or regional planning commission staff for other contracted city. And then it makes a variety of other changes, but wetlands and such. So just one to keep track of. One of my municipal contacts brought it up because it has some changes to municipal planning and zoning. But when I read it, I'm like, whoa, this is Act 250 as well. So just take a look at it. It's odd that it was introduced by 3 senators who are on the Senate Economic Development and Housing Committee, which was the committee that created the Housing Bill S-127 that is moving forward. So I don't really understand the genesis of it, where it's coming from, but I haven't spoken with any of those senators, so I don't know yet.
Look at it more closely, yeah, thank you. In terms of nothing else on the, legislative front from the, budget wise, operationally. Let's see, we are continuing to do the hiring for this district, so that's ongoing. The landing page, as Alex mentioned, for the overall Act 181 is getting revamped. We've got good outlines for that. I guess there's some sort of technological thing happening on Tuesday, so it won't be able to be started that process until Wednesday. A little delay in what we were hoping. We've gotten that outline
one for the overall structure of Act 181 projects, but then also the specific pages have outlined those. The intent there is we'll mock those all up and give you a chance to kind of give a review, and then we'll be updating them over time as you know different stakeholders, or more specifics about meetings that you're going to be held. We'll be able to put all of that into that framework for you all. And then we talked a little bit about with Sarah's comment on the scheduling and staffing. So appreciate all the board's work on that piece of it. We'll take that in, and then I think the leadership team's going to look at it and try to figure out some of those puzzle pieces to put them together a little bit in terms of resources and such. And then probably be coming back to you all and saying, okay, now here's some things where you may want to think about priorities and how to structure those.
Okay, anything else from other staff? Operations, budget, anything?
I'll say two things. The first is that I'm happy to announce that tomorrow we're sending off 180 boxes of material to continue our scanning project in Essex. So
Yay.
for me tomorrow morning, I will be writing manifests back of a moving truck. And that's the culmination of a lot of good work done by those district office staff that talking about previously. The other is that our pay act request is due this week. And that is a annual budgetary thing at the state where when you created the fiscal year 2025 budget, it was about a year and a half ago from when we're implementing it currently. So there were certain health and pay, salaries and benefits assumptions that were made when we were developing that budget that may not hold true now. So it's an opportunity to ask for additional general fund support to continue salaries and benefits for our existing staff members. I provided Janet with that information, and as her appointing authority, she'll be the one signing off on that request, which is due on Wednesday.
Wednesday, end of day?
Wednesday, end of business, yes.
I saw the emails come in, but. Okay, thanks, Rachel. All right, I heard from our legal team that they don't have any need for us to make any decisions for them today. So unless a board member has something that they feel the need for an executive session for, I don't think we need to have an executive session.
I would like to have.
You would?
I have a
Okay.
question for you.
Oh, you do? Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion.
Can you make it first, since you know what we're going to?
Okay.
The regular, I want to enter executive session to discuss that. For those who are- Enter executive session to discuss a pending appeal, have confidential attorney-client communications on these matters, and move that the board find that premature public knowledge of these matters and replace the board at a substantial disadvantage.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
5 ayes, so we will be entering into executive session.
There's a classroom next door.
A classroom next door on that side of it. And you can stay here if you want to watch us adjourn when we come back, but.
I have future land use staffing to do.
Okay, bye. Thanks. All right, we're back.
Yep, we're good.
Are we
Stalwart
recording?
Member of the
Yep.
public still.
It's recording.
Okay, thank you. So we are back from an executive session. And we have no more business on our agenda.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That is 5 ayes from each board member. That is unanimous. Thank you for attending our meeting today.
Our next meeting is Thursday.
Thursday.
Yep.
Maybe see you then, Annette.